Hello and welcome to A Critical Dragon, where I talk about narrative in film, television, and in books. And today I'm going to do something that I very rarely do, which is respond to a video that I saw on YouTube. And it was by Kramer of Living Anachronism. I may accidentally refer to his channel as Creative Anachronism because of the Society of Creative Anachronism, which is a historical thing, but it's Living Anachronism. And he has a brilliant channel. He is a drama fight person who understands fight sequences and choreography and all of that sort of stuff. And he did a breakdown of the dueling sequence, the fight sequence in Numenor between Galadriel and the Numenorean recruits. And I thought it was an absolutely brilliant breakdown. But, and there is a small but here, because although I agree with almost everything that he says in his analysis, I actually disagree with part of his conclusions from it, even though I think that the vast majority of the things that he sees as remedies could also have been added to the scene anyway. I have no problem with what he is suggesting. I have no problem with his analysis. I have no problem with a number of the things that he suggests could have gone into the scene that would have potentially made it better or made it more interesting. No problem with any of that. What I have a problem with is the actual conclusion that he gets to, that the scene is badly done. Just because you can improve something doesn't mean that it is badly done. So let me talk through what I mean by this, because Kramer from Living Anachronism, see, got it right, isolates this sequence and points out that, first of all, establishes quite rightly narrative combat. So combat and action sequences in narrative should add to the narrative. They should support the narrative that they are in. They should support the contextual narrative. So quite frequently, fight coordinators and choreographers narrativize the combat, where the combat itself, the action itself, is telling a story, and that story should support or add to the contextual story, where the surrounding narrative that it is placed in. And Kramer points out that this sequence focuses on Galadriel and not on the Numenorean recruits and their training. That although it's framed as a training a training sequence, a training fight, that very little training happens in it. And in fact, a lot of what Galadriel says, that is almost by the by. It's sort of thrown in. It's an additional thing. It's not the focus of the scene. That there is a moment when Elendil makes a lunge and he's unsure and he hasn't committed to it, and he doesn't look confident, and Galadriel is very confident when she blocks it, and she blocks it not facing him and lifts the sword up to the side, but it still manages to cut her sleeve. And he says that this adds a level of ambiguity. Is she committing? Is she confident in this block or not? If she's confident, why does it hit her? If she's not confident, then why does she try to sell it that she's confident? And he asks a whole load of questions about the scene. And again, don't disagree with a lot of his analysis. The thing is, how you frame, how you look at something can mean that all of your analytical points are absolutely spot on. But it can lead your conclusion to a different place. Because Kramer from Living Anachronism frames this entire discussion, this entire analysis, this entire look at this sequence as it is a training sequence for the Numenorean recruits. And he makes this very clear because he points to a brilliant illustration of a training sequence, which is from Mask of Zorro with Sir Anthony Hopkins and Antonio Banderas. Now, for a start, that's not a one-to-one comparison, because what we have in Rings of Power is a single fight sequence, whereas what we have in Mask of Zorro is a training montage. So in fact, something that's radically different, because the training montage is explicitly and overtly constructed to show significant passage of time so that you can map progress. A single fight sequence, on the other hand, is not meant to show that. That's meant to establish a moment in time and maybe, just maybe, a single slight improvement. Whereas a montage, because a training montage, like we see it in Rocky, we see it in all of these things where there's a sequence, it shows a passage of time. Team America World Police has to have the best sort of training montage sequence with a song ever. Go and watch that because it perfectly explains what a training montage is. But Kramer from Living Anachronism points to this and says this is a brilliant training montage because it shows all of these things, whereas Rings of Power is doing it badly. You go, well, yes, it's doing training montage really badly because it's a single fight sequence, not a training montage. So, yes, of course, it's doing training montage badly. It's not built to show the same things as a training montage. But that's all by the by, because the focus then is he believes the focus should be on the Numenoreans, that this is about their training. After all, Elendil invites Galadriel to train his troops. That's how the scene starts. And you go, yes, yes, it is. Right up until the point where Galadriel says, the first one who's able to hit me gets promoted to lieutenant. And that's where the training sequence ends for the Numenorean troops at that moment, because it switches from she is going to train them to now she is offered a competition. And we see then that Elendil is the one that steps forward. He's going to try and do this. He's going to try and get the promotion. And then gradually the others all sort of pile in, and it's a mass sort of scrum and fight. And what we see in the sequence is everything that Kramer points out, that the Numenoreans are scrappy. The Numenoreans are unsure of what they are doing. The Numenoreans are wild in their attacks. They're not controlled. They're not confident. They're not technically proficient. You know, all the things that brand new recruits would be. So this is illustrating very accurately in the scene, because this is someone saying, yeah, look at this. They're uncontrolled. They're not controlled in their actions. They're not good at using a sword. You go, exactly. They're recruits. And Kramer points out that the whole sequence is actually focused on Galadriel. It's Galadriel having fun. It's Galadriel being playful. It's Galadriel effortlessly moving between them and slapping them on the bum with the flat of a blade, disarming one, disarming a different one, dodging around them, and every once in a while stopping to give like a piece of advice and then carrying on. That the whole focus of this sequence is not on training the Numenoreans. It's focused on Galadriel. Now, you might be asking, why does Kramer think that this is a problem and I don't? Because we both think it is about exactly the same thing. We think it's focused on Galadriel. But the reason I don't think that this is a problem is because of its context in the greater narrative. This is part of the Numenorean thread in the episode in which Galadriel, in the previous episode, had cracked a smile on that very bizarre looking slow motion horse riding enterprise. But this is part of her transition. This is part of her character arc, where she is learning about having fun again. The first couple of episodes have been dire and Galadriel being very serious and focused and fixated on a single point. And the showrunners are trying to give an arc to Galadriel's character, showing that she is learning. And of course, you have to do that gradually. You can't just do a volte-face. You can't just spin a character 180 degrees and go, yes, that's her arc. That would just be pointy. So what they do is they have the scene on the horse riding. They have Galadriel having fun, fighting, mock fighting, but without trying to kill the other people, without trying to hurt the other people. And she realizes that she can have fun, that she has been so fixated and focused on her journey that she has forgotten this aspect of living. And this is very, very important for her. And all the way through this, we have Elendil is watching. And, you know, at times he has that big grin on his face, and other times he's watching to see what's going to happen. Because, of course, Elendil has a couple of concerns. The Numenoreans are wearing armor of a sort, at least sort of gambeson type things, and they have swords. Galadriel is not wearing armor. And so Elendil must be a tiny bit worried here that one of his recruits could accidentally hurt Galadriel. But obviously, as the whole sequence goes on, you can see that Elendil is actually relaxed because no, Galadriel is in no danger whatsoever. Because what the sequence shows us is that Galadriel is actually an awful lot better than these raw recruits, as she should be, as someone who is not only hundreds of years old or thousands of years old, but has been a warrior for hundreds of years, has been attacking and killing orcs for hundreds of years. We would expect Galadriel, not only as an elf, but as a warrior, to be better than these brand new recruits. If the recruits were giving her a hard time, we would find that harder to believe because they are new recruits. She's meant to be a badass. And so her effortlessness, the fact that she finds it easy is part of this. It shows her competence. It also teaches the Numenoreans a bit of a lesson because remember, another part of the Numenorean storyline is not only do they distrust elves, but they are very arrogant. That the hubris of the Numenoreans has been established again and again. It is a running thread of the Numenorean society. That's one of the big things that's being emphasized. So when Elendil calls on her to do this, you can see the Numenoreans kind of sizing her up, going, we'll have a go. And what they learn during this as recruits is A, they are not as good as they think they are. B, Galadriel is a lot better than they think she is. So one of the big things they learn is humility. Second thing is respect for Galadriel. A third thing is admiration. But one of the things, because this all could have gone horribly wrong, this could have been seen as Galadriel being really, really arrogant and prideful, which is part of Galadriel's arc at this point. But this is a moment where she isn't arrogant and prideful. And it's because of what Kramer points to about that block at the end. Elendil throws this thrust, and he is wild, it isn't controlled, he's a bit unsure. And that means the actor is doing the choreography perfectly because he shouldn't be sure. He shouldn't be absolutely committed to it. Firstly, he's inexperienced. Secondly, he isn't actually trying to kill Galadriel. Therefore, he shouldn't be really confident about this. Because combat is combat. They are learning to try and kill people. And he's throwing a thrust at someone when he's not practiced. And also, it's not someone he's meant to be trying to kill. So you can understand that psychological reticence of, I don't actually want to hurt them. So the actor performs the choreography really, really well because it's not meant to be confident. It's not meant to be well executed. It is deliberately bad. It is deliberately weak and second guessing what he is doing. So that, I think, is an excellent point. Kramer points it out. But we come to a slightly different conclusion about the interpretation of it. I think it's good because of those things. Kramer thinks that he should have performed it better. But now we get to the point about Galadriel's block. Now, this is an element of ambiguity because the characters in the show do not go out of their way to explain it. So it's open to interpretation. And Kramer obviously has his interpretation. But my interpretation would be Galadriel needed a way to end the fight. And it's clear through the fight that she keeps coming back to Elendil, the one that initially stood up, the one that initially volunteered. He is the one who would make a good lieutenant. And therefore, she has decided he's the one that she will lose the combat to. So the strike comes in, and unlike all of the other strikes that she has effortlessly avoided or just moved out of the way or easily dispatched, she throws up a block, and Elendil gets her. She made a mistake, or did she? And this is why I think it is actually, you can interpret it a different way from how Kramer does. The block that she throws up is absolutely perfect from stopping the blade from actually cutting her, but not so perfect that it stops it cutting the cloth of her dress. And therefore, she judged the block perfectly to be enough that Elendil can win the promotion, but also perfectly enough that she was in no danger of getting injured. And that would tie in with the fact that she is an elf. She is an extremely powerful elf. She is an extremely well trained elf. She is an extremely well experienced elf. It would tie into all of those things that, yes, this block was deliberately on the cusp between blocking the strike entirely and letting it through to strike her arm. It just cut the cloth. Now, you might think that that's far-fetched, but if we go back to Mask of Zorro for something that is similar, when we see a sword master use the point of the sword to cut cloth of a female character in order to undress her, it shows consummate skill with the blade. Here we see a sword master block to allow just enough of the sword strike through so that the competition can be won, the fight can end, and the promotion be given, but without running into any danger. So why is it, if it is an offensive strike that is completely and utterly controlled, we have no problems with it? But if it is a block that is also achieving those very specific aims that we know have to be achieved, because that's the structure of the competition, that's what's been set up for this fight, these aims have to be achieved. This block does this absolutely perfectly without causing any wound. So we're fine with point control and that being an example of sword mastery, but we're not fine apparently with Galadriel doing the block that way. Whereas I think that is what this is meant to be showing. Now, you could say that because it's ambiguous, because it's not clear that this is what is meant, then maybe it wasn't clear enough in the narrative. And that's a fair enough criticism. But I think when you consider that this is a competition about you have to hit me and to get the promotion, and it goes to Elendil, the one from the beginning, the one with that she keeps coming back to during the fight, that all of this has been about Elendil. You go, well, why would Galadriel do this? And remember what I said about the lessons that the Numenoreans are learning. They are learning humility for their level of ability. They are learning respect for her level of ability. But this could have crushed them. They could have felt absolutely destroyed by the fact that they couldn't land a single touch on Galadriel, that they were terrible. And it could have come across as a very bitter lesson to learn. But because Galadriel pays out in the end, because one of them managed to get her, it takes the sting out of their lesson, the lesson of humility that they have just been taught. And so I think that this sequence works really, really well. Now, Kramer from Living Inaccurate points out that during it, Galadriel could have used coaching tips specifically tied to a movement that she was doing or something that she had countered in the others. And I have no objection to that. Yeah, of course she could have done that. But that is additional to what the scene was doing, because the scene is not about training the Numenoreans in swordplay. The scene is about Galadriel having fun, relaxing, and engaging in playfulness, which is part of her character arc, which is part of the arc of her story, part of the arc of her relationship with Numenor. And all of that is actually done well in that sequence. Could those additional effects that Kramer had talked about be added in? Yeah, sure. It wouldn't have significantly changed any of that. I have no objection to it. But they are not necessary for the scene, because the scene is not doing what Kramer thinks it was meant to be doing. The things that he suggests are absolutely necessary if this is meant to be a training sequence. If the focus of the scene is meant to be focused on the Numenoreans and the Numenoreans learning and showing the Numenoreans leveling up in skill, if that was the focus of the scene, then yes, almost everything that Kramer suggests is absolutely should be there. But that's not the focus of the scene. The focus of the scene is Galadriel. The focus of the scene is about her story. The focus of the scene is not the Numenoreans. That is all additional and extra to the main part of what the narrative is meant to be selling us. That Galadriel is having fun. Galadriel is letting loose. Galadriel is relaxing. Galadriel is starting to see combat and mixing with others as something other than the warrior focused hunting down of darkness that she has been doing for hundreds of years. This is a big moment in her journey, learning some respect and empathy for others, taking into account how the Numenoreans might feel, trying to train them a little bit and having fun while doing it. All of these things are about Galadriel warming as a character. And so the scene, quite rightly, is focused on her and not the Numenoreans. But as I said, I absolutely agree with 99.9% of what Kramer highlights. I absolutely agree that 99.9% of his fixes could be added to the sequence and it wouldn't harm the sequence in any way. In fact, it might improve bits of the sequence. Where I disagree is only on a small thing, which is that these changes are necessary because it's a training montage. You go, it's not a training montage. It is not a training fight. It is not focused on how the Numenoreans are going to improve. The lesson that the Numenoreans are learning in this fight is humility, that they shouldn't be as arrogant. Respect for the elves, and in particular Galadriel, because up until now they have been very suspicious. And also reverence, adoration, a positive feeling towards her and themselves, because one of them managed to cut her dress and she lived up to the requirement and made sure that the person got the promotion. And so she is a comrade. And it builds that sense of comradeship and friendship and respect amongst the group for Galadriel. Because remember, Numenor hates elves. Numenor dislikes elves. Numenor distrusts elves. Now they don't. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Thank you for your continued support, and I will see you in the next one.